The story begins late at night, where in the middle of a dark forest, there is a large cave in which the guy guesses he will have to camp out there tonight, hiding from persecution. To go inside and see what that hunter had, and was very pleasantly surprised, because he was immediately able to find an oil lamp and a large dagger, which the guy will now use very well. Of all the items, the excellent ones are those that cannot be obtained even by the constellations, like this book with a seal, which stands out very much from everything else. Unlike ordinary things created by people, the so-called objects have special abilities. They are divided into different categories: common, rare, relics, and excellent. Even regular category items are valued at a couple of million won. Of all the items, the excellent ones are those that cannot be obtained even by the constellations, like this book with a seal, which stands out very much from everything else. He decided to go inside and see what that hunter had, and was very pleasantly surprised, because he was immediately able to find an oil lamp and a large dagger, which the guy will now use very well. Unlike ordinary things created by people, the so-called objects have special abilities. They are divided into different categories: common, rare, relics, and excellent. Even regular category items are valued at a couple of million won. The guy grabbed the lamp and hit it very lightly with his dagger to turn it on. He lifted it up. It turns out that this dagger is used as a tranquilizer, and only doctors in the alchemy workshop need it. It was nice enough to get the light in the cave in the middle of the night. It is not so useless, although it is quite fragile, so you should use it wisely. He looked at this dagger and began to study it. He was a little angry and shocked, because it still belonged to the person who wanted to destroy it. And he also drew attention to the paralyzing poison that was on his blades. Was it really the same on the arrow that was fired at him? After that, he threw away the dagger and pulled up the canopy, which surprised him very much. He did not expect at all that the old man even had such a thing, and was pleasantly surprised, because now he can hang it in front of the entrance and sleep peacefully. The night was successful. No one could find him and everything was fine, despite the fact that he was a little worried, and wondered if he should still practice his new skills before going to bed. It was also good news that his leg wound had almost healed, thanks to the fact that yesterday he decided to try to heal it himself. Without thinking for a long time, he did so, after which he immediately closed and masked the entrance to the building, which was almost impossible to notice, since the canopy was almost exactly the same as the stones themselves in the cave. So the disguise was very successful. He decided to make some spices for his experiments from leaves he could find in the forest. Baekhaman didn't know who exactly attacked him then, but he certainly didn't look like an ordinary alchemist. He woke up and decided to stretch. The morning definitely started very well, because for the first time in 5 years, the guy was able to sleep well. He himself could not believe that he could sleep even under such crazy circumstances. Baekhaman started screaming in surprise, remembering all of his previous personalities who watched over him after his death. Is he really also some kind of genius? But he received an aggressive response from there that this is definitely not the case. Time passed very quickly, because lunch was already beginning on the street, and the sun fully appeared in the sky. All the animals in the forest woke up. The situation escalated. He looked at his rewound hand, which had a seal and a memory skill on it. He was shocked, but still didn't understand why such a cool skill was considered the 4th level. Do not forget that the benefit of the skill depends entirely on the resourcefulness of its owner. Therefore, the guy decided not to waste time and took his backpack and decided to leave the cave. Analyzing this road, he noticed that so far no traces of hunters could be seen in this area. The tower, which is their main target, is like a home for them, so he needs to be strong enough to survive. He looked at the beautiful plant, which had already grown very large, but he had great fears, because it is definitely poisonous. He looked at its stem and remembered that the vines on this plant are used for medicinal purposes. if he mixes this beetle with the plant, he will have enough healing potion to help save his leg and also be a great vermin repellent. Suddenly, he tensed up and his pupils narrowed. Anxiety overwhelmed him. So he decided that it was worth using the skill to the fullest now, which is why he chose a life called Dynamite. Without thinking twice, he immediately took and pulled out part of the plant and tightly clenched his hand into a fist. In addition, there were many insects flying and many different animals crawling. He spread his hands around and looked up with a smile, because this forest is just a treasure for making various medicines and potions. He was very happy, because just by using skill in this area, he would be able to find useful ingredients, as well as the right ingredients for ointments to heal his wounds. He was very happy, because he will succeed. If he continues in the same spirit, he will be able to survive alone. It was a huge beetle that was very camouflaged and really hard to find. Something very strange appeared in front of him, like some kind of rock between which plants grow. Baekhyun realized this was his chance and rushed at him with his knife. It looked like he was really hungry. The beetle definitely did not expect this, so almost immediately he received a blow that flew in his direction and made him fly off a few meters. But it was not difficult to kick him hard, which he did. From this, he twisted into a big round ball, which was quite surprising and strange, so the guy did not quite understand how to react to this. And then the beetle flew off in a panic and fell on its back, not expecting such impudence from a man, because before his appearance he was practically one of the main ones in the forest. After that, all the remnants of this forest monster flew into the air. And while he was lying on his back, the guy swung with all his might and jumped up, was ready to deliver the final blow to him. It was very easy for him, and the shot came right on target. But it's worth noting that he did it definitely with a lot of aggression. He looked around and clenched his hand into a fist again. Depending on the part of the Shayla, the chosen life can also change. Suddenly, he grimaced very much in pain as his seal began to burn in the truest sense of the word. As it was over, the guy stopped and wiped his forehead with his hand, because the situation was really a little tense, since these physical skills were from Nameless. Therefore, he thought, is it really not Dynamite, but another life? On his brush, small traces of the seal could be seen, despite the fact that it was very heavily wound with bandages. Apparently, it heats up as you use it, and the big downside is that he can't use it for more than a minute. They say every skill has a price, and its side effect is overheating. Day passed very quickly, during which Baekhyun explored all of his new skills and abilities, after receiving this seal from the evil alchemist. If the emotions change every time after he uses the skill, then he feels humiliated in the opposite way. Having taken a bite, he wondered, should he really enjoy this delicious food now? After all, his situation is really the worst of all, which can only be. He kindled a fire and decided to eat some meat, and was very pleased that now he would not have to die of hunger, at least today. Although it looked disgusting, it tasted like shrimp. He ate one piece of meat after another, and on the street, already the sun began to gradually set below the horizon, and evening was approaching. Armor appeared on his hands, which gave the guy great pleasure. He could not get enough of his new skill, since even at this level it can be a very useful defense for him. Half an hour later, he was already fighting with another huge monster, which was several times larger than him. In the duel, his seal also glowed, and it was necessary if he analyzed all the cases in which he used his skill. Then it will become clear to him that he cannot be used for everything, and he will need to think. Which is why, for proper use, the guy needs to set a specific goal for himself. Looking straight ahead, the guy realized that if he has a strong obsession for some reason, or because of some emotion, then the effectiveness of the skill changes, as well as the emotional state, apparently, affects the rate of synchronization. The night was already beginning, so the guy sat on a rock and decided to look at his percentage of synchronization. He was very surprised that the ability Dynamite and Nameless had been used the most in his life. But the synchronization was still very low. Then behind him, the memories of his previous selves appeared, watching him from above. He realized that the life he chose is called the only one, and it takes 52% of all resources from him. This is almost 5 times more than with other lives. He looked at his hand and realized that when the seal was formed, the experience was 98% similar. But does this mean that the only one also changed his seal? From such a guy was very surprised and tensed. Because in this case, what will happen when the percentage of experience similarity reaches 100? It was already very dark outside. The sun had gone below the horizon, and a deep night had formed a dark night, which was illuminated by a large moon with a red tint. The guy looked at the sky and remembered the old message, which said that when the seal is formed, the constellations often contact you. But he was tormented by the thought that he had never been chosen by any constellation. He was a little happy, although there were no reasons for this. Just the thought that the constellations were looking down on him, trying to show him that the seal was useless. Dynamite, Nameless, and only one. These are the people who he has never seen in his life. He is constantly helped. He stretched his hands up in gratitude and smiled. Because in any case, no matter which constellation chose him, he is sure that it would not be better than now. Therefore, it is much better to live with these people, who he has never seen. One of the masters yelled back at the guy, "Bakehamen, I'm very glad that you recognized me, and am proud of the fact that you're fine." He was very upset that the guy did not call him because he can also catch huge beetles and locusts. But his other personality reassured the master, and said that Bakehamen would need his help very soon. In the temple, in which all his personalities stayed after death, there were many activities. All the personalities wanted to be called, because they were very bored to be in that place and watch everything. The only one did not calm down and fell into a small tantrum, because he also catches bugs very well and knows alchemy. Another person was completely unhappy with this, because he was tired of listening to this whining, and he asked to stop. Because is he really a child? Another person could not stand it and approached the great magician to say that the guy's synchronization with him is already the highest. What else does he want? This already means that his resemblance to Bakehamen is already above the rest, right? The great magician was very glad to hear this and said that his interlocutor was right, and his words really made sense. He smiled and said that in this way, the great magician is most like him. And that is why he copes so well with all difficulties. The guy with the mask on his face said that this grand magician is still calm compared to how he behaved with you. Realizing that the current personality is practically the same as him pleased the magician very much. So he decided to go and even clean up after what he had done, which greatly surprised everyone around him. He became very upset and said that he really hoped that they would somehow be able to talk to Bakehamen. They began to talk, and then he continued to talk about how the great wizard was very worried. It is not surprising, because he finally had the opportunity to show his skills, but he was called only once. If it were possible, he is sure that the great wizard would not be so upset. He heard this and abruptly turned around because he had a brilliant idea. Therefore, he told other individuals that they needed to figure out how to talk to him and do it as soon as possible. Marshal King was shocked and decided to clarify what he means. Is it really just a talk? Hansen said that the reason their child's life is always in danger is because of a lack of communication. The masked man was surprised at the word child and asked if the great wizard was not single. But he got angry and asked to shut up because all Bakehamen were single and died like that. Marshal King didn't know how to react because it feels like he has just come across a major spoiler. The master continued to say anyways, even though I did not get married, I've seen countless Hamans growing up. This really surprised the others because did he just say that there really is a way to contact Baek Haman? He looked up at the sky and said that thanks to the memory skill, they had the ability to influence him. He was very serious because if they managed to control the tower system in any way, then maybe they could push the limits of their capabilities. Of course, this carries great risks and dangers, which is not surprising. The Martial King asked if the Grand Wizard is really serious now and not lying, to which he replied that even he did not always understand the course of his thoughts. He also entered into the conversation and said that if there is such a way, then what are they waiting for? You need to start right now. The Grand Master said that there was a small problem. They needed to get the opportunity and enough time to change the guy's seal. This will not only cause the seal to overheat, but will most likely even begin to melt his skin. But the guy said that Haman had never used typing for more than a minute anyway, all because of memory. He was right, and they cannot risk his hand to try to implement it. The great magician reassured them and told them not to worry, because the right time will come, and they will be able to fix everything before this happens. More of an issue is how brave they are to do something like that, because it's not something you can just ask for. He smiled, because when was it that the tower worked according to plan? Therefore, the magician waved his hands and looked at the sky, because it is not known when such an opportunity will come. So you need to start preparing right now. He began to create holograms in the sky and started the process of preparing for this process, so as not to waste time in the future. It looks like they began to burn a little and increase, which caused a little excitement among all the surrounding personalities who watched this process. One of them was very frightened and asked the great magician if it was possible for him to influence this imaginary world in this way. But the guy in the mask reassured him and said that this is what only he can do. No one else can do it. So it's better not to distract him, and you just need to watch. Meanwhile, the holograms were getting bigger and bigger each time, and they continued to grow. Baek Haman was a little nervous, since it's only been 3 days since he ran away from Old Man. But the changes that are happening to his body right now are incredible. Who wanted to finish him off very quickly, and also noticed the fact that at this level, they were like defenseless children who couldn't do anything. Baek Haman decided to ask him, does he really has to continue doing this low-wage job? Tell the elder to stop it already. Given that they have already caught up and found him, we can conclude that they are still quite fast. He continued to walk with his backpack and noticed that this was already his 3RD battle. Besides, he also hunted at the same time. So now he is at the peak of his strength. He looked at the tower that gave access to the 5th floor and realized that it was already very, very close to him. He continued to watch her and rejoice, and since he has enough things that he was able to take away from the hunters, he will finally be able to enjoy a real hunt. And in the old man's tent, there were very interesting conversations, where they could not understand how Baek Haman could destroy their 3rd hunter. How is this possible? The elder stood in front of his subordinates and asked if, without the necessary equipment and weapons, he had already been able to put down 3 hunters? To which the bald one said that it seems he's past the territory of coincidence. The elder from this became very angry and quickly grabbed the bald man by the shirt, asking what he meant. What else was the territory of coincidence? Is he kidding him? Hadn't he told them many times that there was something wrong with Baek Haman? He did not want to endure such treatment to himself, so he grabbed his hands and tried to bring him to his senses, especially in front of the others. But the elder did not stop and continued to insult him and shout at his ward. Despite his respect for his superior, he remained calm and tried to explain that if a senior hunter was treated with such disrespect, the hierarchy in the tower would be destroyed. Therefore, she calmly said that he should go to the lower floors, which the elder could not have expected at all, and asked how dare he speak to him like that. Was he telling him to get out of here right now? He was really furious. No, he was just trying to explain that while he was here, their job was getting very difficult. So they would keep looking for him. But in order to be successful, he needed to get to the lower floors. He was very angry, which was easy to see in his eyes. But still, he agreed and said that he would do it. But he would still follow them. The elder hunter thanked him for his trust and promised that he would bring him the guy's hand very soon. Meanwhile, Baekhomen was already standing in front of the tower and realized that he was already in the right place, and it was time to start. He held onto the straps of his backpack and said that now he can practice before entering the 5th floor, and the parasites that appear here will significantly increase his level. And when he gets to the 5th floor, then, as the rumors say, it will be impossible to return until you reach the 10th floor. He looked at the main entrance and continued to wonder if he really should be doing this right now. But suddenly, he decided to look back and realized that he still had unfinished business. Near the tower, one could already hear the sounds of hunters discussing the guy, and the fact that his footprints were found here, near the tower. There were many of them. They all reported to the bald man and assumed that the guy was already on the 5th floor, and there was nothing to be done. Therefore, the bald man started shouting at them and said that then they would also go there, and that 2 days would be enough for them to catch him. His hunters were very frightened by this, because it was the first time they would go to the 5th floor. Would they really be of any use? They also said that once they got there, they would not be able to return until they reached the 10th floor. The bald one decided to cheer them up and said that he had already climbed to the 10th floor many times and there would be no problems with this. So if they follow his instructions, then everything will go smoothly and successfully. So he ordered them to be quiet and move forward towards the entrance. They had no choice, so they agreed. And now, a second later, the hunters had already gone through the portal and entered the tower building. Very quickly they went in, when suddenly one of them stopped and did not completely enter the portal. It seems that he had some kind of strange premonition, but it was not too late to return back. The bald man thought that perhaps Baekhomen decided to mock them and left obvious signs of his presence here in order to confuse them all. He was very excited because he did not understand whether this could really happen. Did the guy really have to have reasons for such actions? Nevertheless, doubts continued to torment him, and he looked back to finally make sure that his theory was still correct. Meanwhile, the traces of the parasites were simply huge, and if you follow them, you can go unnoticed and not give out your traces. This is exactly what the guy did and continued to follow them, because he understood that at his current level, it was better not to run into that bald man yet. And besides, he would just die in a second if he only set foot on the 5th floor. And if they are there, then he will be able to avoid fighting them. Baekhomen assumed they were still busy looking for him on the 5th floor, which made him laugh a little. But a bald hunter flew out of the bushes, who began to shout at the guy and said that he could not run away that far, which he clearly could not expect, and was frightened. He was angry and shocked at how the bald man did not fall for this, so it was necessary to think of something very quickly in order to at least be saved. But the bald one himself started the conversation and decided to tell the guy how he could find him, adding that these are the most standard actions for beginners, to follow the tracks of parasites, because this is a very slow way to escape, and it can be easily tracked if you look closely at the tracks. But Baekhomen smiled and took out his dagger, asking if the bald man is so smart. Why didn't he manage to catch him earlier? By the looks of it, he was running around in circles like a decapitated rooster. The bald man also took out an axe and did not understand what was wrong with the guy. After all, if he had told the elder the whole truth, then all this could have been easily avoided. The guy started laughing because he felt his superiority. Usually the bald man is not as sociable as he is now. Is he trying to regain his strength? But he continued to try to talk to the guy and said that he was ready to give him a chance. if he calmly passes after him, he will only lose his arm. But Haman did not plan to listen to his words and prepared for battle, although he decided to say that his skill is really called memory. The bald man looked at him with disbelief and was also ready to fight. In the meantime, a system was activated that announced that the memory skill was activated and the chosen life, Martial King. Therefore, Haman received the support of another of his personality, and decided that he would finish him faster than he had time to rest. Therefore, he immediately ran into battle and decided to make the first kick. They entered into a fight, although the guy had been afraid of her like fire for several minutes before. But in battle, he looked quite confident. But all this was up to a certain point, until he made a mistake and, having missed, fell to the ground. The bald one became very aggressive and started yelling at the guy. Had he really been hiding his abilities all this time? Or is it all because of the memory skill? He panicked a bit as he attacked as soon as he used the skill. His thoughts have changed. Most likely, he will not be able to defeat his opponent with the current level now. The bald one continued to put pressure on him, saying that if the guy agreed to just give his hand, then he would be able to tell the elder that he simply died. He wondered what he thought about this proposal. But the Haman was steadfast and said that it was funny for him to hear that. He continued to fight and brandish his weapons. Does the bald man really think that the guy will believe him? Does he look like that naive person who was born just yesterday? Therefore, using all his strength, Haman brandished his dagger and began to scream and run further into the battle. But he did not notice how the back part fell off him and flew right into his mouth. He accidentally swallowed it and was very surprised by this. The bald man was very frightened because it was really a stimulant that the guy had just swallowed. But where could he get this drug? He laughed at his surprise, so he was already running to strike back, saying that he got this stimulant just from those who were chasing him. Thanks to him, Haman's body became noticeably stronger. The guy immediately rushed into battle and attacked the bald man with great force. He was ready to end this confrontation as quickly as possible. It seemed to him that at any moment, he could go crazy, so he needs to hold out as long as possible, and at least have time to finish off this opponent. The bald man was very frightened and angry. He understood that the guy's skill brings him very big troubles that need to be addressed right now. He took out his axe and rushed to attack, but the guy had something magical in his hand, which emitted a blue glare. Unexpectedly for himself, he found that his dagger was destroyed, and with one not the strongest blow he left him without a weapon, which made Haman very scared. At that moment, the bald one rushed at him with punches, as he decided not to finish off the guy who was already without a weapon, so he decided to deal with him with his own hands. From this, Haman fell to the ground and was noticeably exhausted, since he did not expect such an outcome of events. Everything was fine until his dagger was destroyed. He looked in panic at his hand, the seal of which began to burn and again bring him discomfort. He did not understand why, even with a stimulator, he had no strength. His skills were also already at the limit. The bald one admitted that the guy really makes him sweat normally. He could not even imagine that he would also have to use his skill in a duel with him. Haman understood that it was urgent to come up with something, because if this continued, he would die. And very quickly. There was also a conflict in the observer camp, where the great mage attacked the Martial King, insulting him. Because if he was summoned, then isn't it his task to get rid of this opponent? He panicked, saying that he was just about to do it, but the guy used a stimulant and he lost control of his body. The magician looked at the second person, accusing him of not informing the guy about the consequences of the stimulant. But he denied everything, saying that he was well aware of all the possible consequences of its use. They started to get worried, because if Haman couldn't defeat him with his skill, then he probably thought that the stim was the only way out. The Grand Magician stepped back and said that it was his fault that he had entrusted them with this task. They were worried because at such a pace he could really die, and they would not save him. The Great Magician began to rush them, asking when the seal would be ready for a new call. She was already cooling down, but still needed time. This made the magician think and analyze the current situation again. He was very dissatisfied and wanted to help the guy. He raised his hands and realized that he himself could make sure that the right time came to strengthen the seal. His other personalities were shocked at this decision and became frightened, asking if he was really sure about this decision now. But the Great Magician was resolute, because he understood that they had no other choice. It was necessary to act right now. He looked at the Martial King and said that he might be called again, so no matter how, he must keep the memory alive, even if his hand is covered with a crisp. This greatly surprised the Martial King, because is it really possible to start and end this process at their will? But the Grand Magician said that he was only summoned once, so he doesn't know how it actually works. But this time, he managed to understand the fact that he managed to hold out longer than the rest of the personalities when he restored the seal to the guy. Everyone watched him and listened attentively. This means that there is no time limit for use, and it all depends on the situation itself, as well as on how long you can endure pain. Therefore, he began to call on the seal, while talking with the warlike king, once again explaining to him the task that he must complete at any cost, and with all his might. At that moment, the bald man was already approaching the guy and took out his axe. It seems that he was ready to finish everything right now. He hit him with all his might, but Baekhyun continued to fight with his last strength, jumping away from the blow. This irritated the bald man very much. He did not understand why he was running away, because before that he fought with him as if he was ready to destroy him with his bare hands. Can't he just fight because his sword is broken? He said that if he was really a hunter, he should be ready for any outcome of events. But he was not ready to say goodbye to life now, so he did not think of anything better than to start running away. But this did not work, as the guy fell to his knees and began to vomit. The bald man noticed this and said that apparently the effect of the drug was ending. It was funny for him to watch this, since his opponent's body will now be completely exhausted. He already knows this process well. The guy understood that now was not the time for this at all, and that he needed to save himself somehow. With the last of his strength, the guy raised his hand up, trying to support himself, saying that you need to hold on and fight on. He had no strength at all. Every step was difficult for him. How to fight in such a state is incomprehensible. Pupils have decreased, and it was necessary to come up with something very urgently, because it could not continue like this. This was noticed by the bald man, who began to laugh at the situation, because does the guy really want to try to get rid of lethargy? It's unbelievable. But how is he going to fight with a broken arm? Unexpectedly for himself and the enemy, he came up with the idea to remove his backpack from his shoulders, and immediately put it right in front of him, giving him the function of a protective shield, which caused laughter from the bald man. Is that really all he plans to oppose him with? He was also surprised that he didn't do anything. Didn't his seal have some hidden power? Baekhyun at this point was recovering as much as possible and didn't answer his questions. Immediately, the bald one rushed into battle with an axe to end this whole battle, so it was still necessary to come up with something. In his pocket was the same lamp that the guy could find from the hunters, so he held on to it and waited for the right moment to answer and take him by surprise. Hitting the backpack with an axe created a large flash that blinded the opponent and also the guy himself. The exact hit created great discomfort for the bald man and allowed him to gain some time. He was severely blinded, so he really could not see anything, which Haman took advantage of and quickly ran to escape. He answered him with his own phrase, saying that the bald man is a hunter, and the hunter needs to be ready for anything, right? He got angry and started swinging his axe around, trying to hit the guy even though he couldn't see anything. Did he light an oil lamp on purpose in battle? Haman was glad that his seal had finally cooled off, so now he was able to return to normal combat. He used his skill again and summoned the martial king to finish what he started and destroy the enemy. The king noticed that the guy began to take a different approach to the battle. This is the feeling of fighting with a strong opponent. Haman did not wait and flew to the attack to take revenge, where the bald man was already waiting for him and was ready to answer. He was already very close to his head, and it was only necessary to make an accurate hit with a dagger. The bald man was frightened and angry. He did not understand how the guy could learn such movements in such a short period. Haman understood that he needed to finish with him before the limit expired and was very angry. Rage completely captured his head. The holograms in the sky continued to work, and the process had already been launched. It was already impossible to return it back. The Grand Master said that the guy needs to be patient a little more. There is very little time left. This was too risky, as the Master would also be unrecoverable if it dissipated. But he replied that he had already taken this into account and was ready for any consequences. It took very little time for their whole plan to work. The bald one seemed to be frightened, because he did not expect to see such a thing in a duel, which had already dragged on for a long time. His vision returned to him, which he was very happy about, so he rushed into battle and informed the guy that he had lost his chance. The great warrior began to worry about the fact that the guy's body did not keep up with his movements, and their time was already at the limit. The guy was scared and angry at the same time, so he looked in the direction of his seal. The hand began to burn with pain, just like the seal began to smoke and bring simply unbearable pain from which you can easily lose consciousness. The warrior started to worry and didn't know what to do, because Haman wants to cancel the effect of the skill, so he also began to apologize to the Grand Mage for what he couldn't do. He continued to work with holograms and refused to believe that everything would end this way, because the hunter would really destroy the guy now? But Haman raised his dagger with the last of his strength to complete the unfinished work. And instead of rushing into a duel with the bald man, he stabbed the seal with all his might to lessen his pain. The warrior was very much shocked, as he had never seen such a thing before. The masked magician also couldn't believe it, because the guy really stabbed his hand with his knife to muffle the pain. It's even hard to believe. The great magician began to laugh, because he felt funny from what kind of way out of this situation he managed to find. He was very happy and proud for this guy. He liked that he was brave and was ready to help him further to the very end. Even the hunter himself was shocked by what was happening and stopped, because did the guy really lose his brains? But he was determined and rushed further into battle with his dagger in order to finally destroy the hunter, which, as you can see, is far from easy. He was also fed up with it, so he swung his axe and was ready to hit him back. But he did not succeed because the guy was faster and jumped under his arms to knock him down. The bald man screamed in pain and did not understand what was happening to him. Haman was also shocked and scared at the same time. It seemed to him that time stopped for a second from excitement. The dagger hit right on target, and the guy was able to shove it unexpectedly into the enemy, which he clearly did not expect. The bald man looked up and seemed to want to say a few more words to his opponent, but he did not manage to do it, because literally immediately he fell to the ground, which also very much surprised the winner himself. And now, a second later, the bald hunter lies unconscious on the ground, in an already soiled shirt after a losing battle. His pupils disappeared and his breathing stopped. This was the last duel for the hunter. The guy was frightened and did not understand what he had just done. Did he really destroy someone? He fell to the ground and began to cry and worry about the situation, because he did not know what to do now. He put his hand on the ground and leaned on his sore hand, which he had injured with a knife during the duel. He tried to convince himself that it was not his fault, because it was self-defense, and they were trying to kill him. He writhed in pain and realized that he was only trying to survive, and kept telling himself that it was not his fault. He closed his eyes and begged for someone to tell him and confirm that he was not at all guilty of this. At that moment, he heard a sharp sound and opened his eyes, as he did not understand what was happening. A system appeared in front of him, which greatly surprised the guy. He had never seen such a thing before. He was informed that the Constellation, the only one, really likes him, although the guy still did not understand what this meant. At the top, the whole team of personalities were happy that they managed to do this. Everyone wondered how it was possible to do this, because in the whole history, this is now their first connection with Baek Homin. Their happiness knew no bounds, because the great magician was able not only to print a seal, but also to noticeably improve the system itself. This is not magic, but a real miracle. Other personalities ran up to him and enjoyed what was happening. They continued to praise him because he can rule the heavens, and he is really amazing. They showed a thumbs up and asked if they could like him like this. No, there is no sincerity in their like, so they tried to put all their energy into it, by the way. You can do the same, it will be very nice. All the constellations started sending their likes to the guy who looked at these notifications from the system and was surprised. He was shocked and could not understand how the constellations can send him likes. Do they really praise him? They rejoiced, because this is the power for which the guy almost gave his hand, and the great magician almost disappeared. The warrior was upset because he expected too much from this, because he thought that there would be a more working way to contact him. At this point, everyone continued to rejoice at the success, because for the first time in a decade, they succeeded. They asked him why he stands and does nothing. You need to like. Since they like it so much, it is most likely a great feat. The constellations continued to send the guy their likes with notifications in huge quantities. After 10 minutes, this already began to annoy him, so he began to scream and ask them to stop, because he already understood what they like. Instantly, all the likes stopped, which surprised him very much and created a misunderstanding. He sighed and said that even if they are constellations that he has never heard of, he still enjoys so many likes. It's amazing that all the lives in his memory are constellations, and if they send him likes at such a moment, does this mean that they are watching me? He was as serious as possible and realized that this was the case. He was being watched. Moreover, after defeating his opponent, he has now entered the world of hunters. He yawned and got to his feet, cheering himself up and telling him to build up his strength. After that, he began to rejoice like a small child, trying to understand and find support. So he started asking the constellations if they were talking to him through likes that he was doing well. It was very important for him to hear confirmation from their side. At that moment, the constellations sent him a like, which confirmed his whole theory. He felt a little funny because they can only send likes. But it will still be enough. It's better than nothing. His wrist began to burn with pain again, like in previous times. Only this time, from the prolonged use of the seal, as he even stuck a dagger in his hand. He looked at the sky and turned to Mr. Dynamite. He needed a hint on how to create a cure for recovery, and activated his memory skill. The night was gradually ending in the street, and dawn was approaching, which was already very close. He decided to try again to prepare the medicine using herbs and acorns with the help of constellation clues. After that, he lay on his bedspread and was glad that he was able to make a middle-class medicine and everything worked out for him. Haman was glad and happy to be watched and helped. As he lay down, the likes continued to rain down on him from the constellations. He also noticed that the one sends a like to just about any of his actions. Initially, he was sure that communication with the constellations was impossible for him. and it is surprising that he is connected with such cool constellations. They even send him likes all the time. He closed his eyes and went to sleep in the hope that in the future he would be able to meet with them, and the day also turned out to be very difficult. He woke up already late in the morning and was tired after he opened his eyes, although this is not surprising. He sat down and looked around, because he already had to do something and keep moving, and his head hurt a lot. But it's not scary. The most important thing is that the pain on the wrist is almost gone. After such great news, the pain in his head instantly disappeared. The guy stretched and was very happy because it was all thanks to the dynamite medicine, so he feels great. He was very scared when he received an alert about new likes from the constellations, as he thought that they were also sleeping. The weather was just great. There were green trees in the forest and a beautiful sky that was pleasing to the eye. The guy decided to take a walk in the forest and saw interesting plants that he wanted to take a few pieces, as this can be useful for the dynamite skill. He also thanked him for the like. The mood was just great, because now his every step is controlled by the constellations, and it will be extremely difficult to do something wrong. So he decided that he still needed to hunt. The constellations continued to send him likes, supporting all his ideas. This made him very angry, because he was tired of getting likes for any reason and asked to stop doing it. And the likes immediately stopped again, which again led the guy into a slight stupor. Then he came up with the perfect idea. If the answer to the question is yes, then let them send a like. If not, then don't send. You understand? Then the constellations immediately sent him a like, confirming the agreement and making it clear that they understood everything. Therefore, he decided to communicate with them and ask if they are really constellations. What he liked. He looked into the sky and tried to understand who they were, because he had never heard of their names. Are they from another tower? There was no answer, so the guy guessed that they were from this tower then. He began to think, since he had not heard anything about them, it means that they are not very famous. He immediately began to remember all the constellations that he knew. And even if about half of the constellations died or disappeared, then the constellation is absolutely a creation. Is it possible that the 3 constellations have remained unknown? He didn't understand what was going on at all. The personalities also began to get upset and ask the great magician, is this really all they are capable of? The masked magician said that it would be much better if they could transmit more information. But he got angry and said that if they had made it more efficient, the tower would have noticed them. But the warrior also decided to add his opinion, because it is one thing if they could not communicate with him at all, and quite another when they already have such an opportunity. But it's even more annoying because of such vagueness. They could at least make a dislike button or something like unsatisfactory, or you can't do that. The great magician got very angry and started yelling at them, because he risked his life for this. Are they all so smart? Let them rejoice, like. Guy continued to walk through the forest and noticed that with this method, his supply of questions is limited, so he will try to ask around later about something. He also wondered if his synchronization rate with Marshal King had increased significantly, and then a system appeared in front of him, which gave information on statistics. It turns out that the figure is already 91% and yesterday it was no more than 20%. Was the fight with the bald hunter really that big? It turns out that being in a critical situation greatly increases the percentage. Or was it because of his first destruction? Strange sound near him and was frightened, because he did not expect this at all. These were the same hunters of the Elder who continued to search for him. He stepped back a little and noticed how one of them got into the web of a huge spider. And it looks like he will die now. Baekhaman looked closer and noticed that there should not be such spiders on this floor. Is it a mutant? In the meantime, the spider is already attacking its prey, which is not clear how it got into its web. The guy was frightened and did not know how to react, because it is really very dangerous. although he did not plan to save his offenders anyway. A dialogue was formed between the personalities. If a mutant spider appeared, then this means that this is the same idiot, right? Yes, it looks like it. I was on that subjugation team. I remember there were 1.4 billion of them. The warrior also said that he already had the opportunity to touch the core of the mutated spider, as it was in the Alchemist Guild, and he remembers the guild master selling it for 1.1 billion won. The great magician said that everything is true and that he really is. It was the boss of this floor, a huge and scary spider, a black forester, who had already begun to attack his victim. The guy was scared and did not expect to see this, and also did not understand how to react to this. However, it was not yet a boss, judging by its size. It is still quite young for a real boss. Looking at him, one would not think that he will be able to capture the ATT floor in a month and become the floor boss, which will close the supply routes from the upper floors. They were very lucky because they met with him when they could destroy him themselves. So the team started sending a huge amount of likes to the guy right now, which was hard to miss. He wondered why they send likes at a moment like this. Want to say that you need to fight this monster? He immediately took out his dagger and told them that in the fight with the hunter, he used an oil lamp and a painless dagger. He exhaled and lowered his head, since such tricks on this monster would no longer work for him. But the constellations kept sending him likes, as if motivating him to take action and complete this mission right now. The guy also understood everything and asks them if he really needs to fight him now, and he said that he would watch him a little more before the battle. But we didn't have to wait long. The spider decided to attack the guy first, which made him nervous and run away. This spider looked several times larger than the guy himself, so fear in this case was an absolutely normal reaction, because it is not at all clear how to overcome it. He turned in his direction and did not understand when this monster appeared here and increased so much. But there is no way out, you have to fight. Without hesitation, Baekhaman decided to call his assistant, and the Martial King immediately appeared behind him, who was also ready for battle. There was absolutely no time to think, so it was necessary to act right now. The guy was scared and did not want to fight a huge monster that was dozens of times taller than him. But thanks to the fact that he called Martial King behind his back, there was a synchronization that allowed him to adopt the experience of his previous personalities by 34%. It's just great, because now he was looking at the monster and analyzing the current situation, as it became possible to see where the monster wanted to strike, and was ready for it. He drew his blade and looked boldly into the monster's eyes. But he wondered if the warlord had encountered such spiders before? The spider decided not to wait for the lyrical introduction to pass, and rushed to the attack, opening its mouth wide. Seeing this, the guy also rushed into the fight to strike first and gain an advantage. When he came to a sufficient distance, he abruptly jumped at the feet of the spider and dodged his blow. Whereupon he immediately took out his favorite blade and thrust it with all his might into the spider's lower body to tear it apart. It is worth admitting that he did it well, and after a few skillful movements, the spider was cut in half and screamed in pain. Baekhaman felt the power of victory and gained a huge amount of confidence thanks to his seal and new skills. When the animal fell to the ground and practically did not move, the guy looked at him and continued to observe the situation. He was very surprised by this outcome of events, because he seemed to instinctively know about his weak points. He was pleased that he was able to defeat this monster himself. He felt very funny from this, and his confidence was at the highest level, because he continued to tell himself that he knew how to defeat the mutant, whom he saw for the first time in his life. But his happiness did not last long, as the huge spider had already begun to breathe into the guy's back, and was not at all as friendly as it seemed at first glance. He lifted his head up and couldn't believe his eyes. Was there really another spider there? This one seems much larger than the previous one. Suddenly, the spider began to growl and activate its superpowers. Red flames and white highlights flew out of its mouth. It is worth admitting that this greatly frightened the guy, and he even screamed in fear and a large release of adrenaline into his body. It was already dark outside, and you could see the entrance to another cave, in which the guy can spend the night when he finishes all his business with the monster. And so it happened, only a little different from how he imagined it, because he was hanging warm, but only with his head down. So he had to apologize to the Constellations for such a mistake, because he had no choice but to pretend to be dead and give catch yourself. He looked around and was very glad that the spider did not eat him on the spot, but simply went on to hunt. So now it is extremely necessary to try to get out and leave this place. His seal started to burn again as he had just used his skill again. He was able to get out and fall to the ground because the seal completely burned the spider's cocoon and allowed him to free himself. He was very happy because he found another way to use his skill, and it's just fine. He also got a little dirty. It was time to look around the cave, after which Baekhyun was surprised that there were so few mutants and all these eggs were completely empty. But the Martial King tried to explain to the guy that this is a solitary lifestyle, where they devour each other and the last survivor becomes the boss of the floor. Those who are about to become the boss also devour their relatives for their power. But it seems that there is an individual who overcame his instincts and escaped. It must be the one who was destroyed by Baekhyun. He was very serious, because he knew that now the guy would have to kill the real boss of the floor. So the Grand Master turned to him and ordered him to immediately check his synchronization rate. He continued to explore the cave in which he found himself and stumbled upon spider claws as well as sticks. It was not difficult to guess that it would be very problematic if the spider returned ahead of time. He checked his sync stat and noticed that it had noticeably increased after killing that spider. But had it gone up to 100%? There was a notification from the system, which reported that the synchronization with the Martial King is a little more than 100%. He looked at the system and was very interested in what changes when the level of synchronization increases. Is there really any noticeable change? The system also offered him his reward for increasing his sync rate with the king, and gave him one choice: equipment, skill, stats, or memory. The guy was very happy with such a bonus, although he did not know what he should choose, since the choice was simply huge. But his happiness did not last so long, exactly until the moment when it was worth deciding on the choice of reward. A conflict also began in the Constellation camp, where the king tried to convince everyone that the guy now needed characteristics, and the moment would come when he could not survive on one improvisation. The masked person wasn't sure if it was really worth choosing this skill right now, since it's not that dangerous in the lower floors. But the city is full of mercenaries and hunters who are hired by the elder. The great magician became very aggressive and started screaming, because it is necessary to choose the skill memory, which surprised his teammates very much. Why statistics? He can just train, and he can improve his printing if he can earn money, but he has nowhere to get a memory. He continued to shout and tell everyone that the guy must definitely choose a memory, as this is the best decision that can be. They were shocked by his genius, because their memory really has information from the future, and memories can greatly enhance the memory skill. The Grand Mage continued to talk to everyone about memory and its benefits, but the king interrupted him and asked what would happen if Baekhyun chose the equipment, to which the magician replied that this would never happen. He's not an idiot. Since ancient times, he was convinced that weapons are only for show. But what really matters is training and a strong spirit, as well as a seal covered with gold. The warrior agreed with this, but not completely. There were still nuances with which he fundamentally disagreed. The great mage started screaming and said that the current Haman is the most similar to him, and he will definitely choose the memory. When there were only two possible options left in front of him, he had to choose from what he had. The guy pointed his finger at him and noticed that the choice was as obvious as possible, and only an idiot would not choose him. So he pressed his finger and chose equipment as his good performance bonus. At that moment, all the constellations were shocked and did not even know how to react to this, so they simply remained silent and watched the situation. After a few seconds, the Grand Magician couldn't help himself and was extremely aggressive and started screaming, because how dare the guy just do that? He looked at the gear and said that it was the favorite choice of all hunters, and those who became constellations were challenged by the tower. And if they can pass the test, they will have the opportunity to receive a unique weapon that can be used in battle. Worth noting that the items that the tower itself gives out are of excellent quality and have truly unimaginable properties. Since it can only be obtained after the death of the constellation or by inheritance, it is priceless. It is absolutely obvious that there should be equipment that is just what he needs now. He smiled and begged the system to give him a weapon of superior quality as soon as possible. He was still in anticipation and really could not get enough. He literally had euphoria from the fact that in a moment he would already be waiting for him. But the system appeared again and said that the synchronization with the warlike king is now again level 2 and less than 1% full, which the guy could not understand at all. It looks like it was just a level up, and so the sync level is back to 0%. Maybe he needs to use his skill for some effect? He looked into the sky and noticed that the constellations became somehow quiet after the choice of the guy. After this, he himself began to wonder if he had made the wrong choice after all. The great magician was very aggressive and said that this stupid one did not look like him at all, because how can you choose a weapon from the whole list? The warrior tried to somehow calm him down, since he probably just needs equipment right now. After a short walk through the cave, the guy saw some kind of dagger that lay near another stone near the rock and immediately drew attention to it. He was very happy that the spider was able to spit out his own weapon and thanked the gods for at least having it now. Something abruptly fell to the ground and created a loud noise that frightened the guy and made him nervous. Looking closer into the cave, he noticed that a huge spider was moving straight towards him. Homan realized that this is the same spider that did not go hunting because it was shedding. So he left the guy alive so that after this process was completed, he could be eaten. He realized that this was his chance, and he needed to act immediately. So he needed to destroy the spider before it finished molting. He ran up to him and hit him with all his might with his dagger, trying to break him completely and end the fight ahead of schedule, and with minimal energy consumption. But he was very much surprised by the fact that the spider's shell is shock impenetrable and cannot be destroyed with a simple sword. He was very scared because already the shell had become much harder, and he had finished his process of molting. Now it seems it is the turn of the spider itself to strike.